All right, Article 4. My goal is to get at least Article 4 done today. It is relatively straightforward. I thought about starting off reorganizing this and starting off at the beginning of the year looking at all the places that liberals have destroyed the Constitution. And then I thought, well, we might as well just read it straight through. Because that's what it would take. But anyway, looking at some of those especially egregious places and then going back and reading the rest. And that way, if we get crunched at the end, we're at least not crunched on the things that liberals confuse for us. But, oh well, we're like this for this year. Article 4, here we have some miscellaneous things involving states. How do we describe it at the beginning? I should know this. State and federal government. Here we go. All right. Less than, in my small copy, are less than 2 full pages. So we can do this. In my notes, it's 1 page. And that's the Constitution, the text, and all of my notes, which there's not a whole lot of my notes here. So this is. Yes, we hopefully will finish this before class is over and then magnify the excitement and begin looking at Article 5. Yeah, I'm sorry, Sarah, please. Well, you got a whole almost week to recover, so. Section 1, Article 5, Section 1. Full faith and credit shall be given in each state to public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of every other state. Okay? Surface level, this is a very simple idea. If some state issues a birth certificate for you, other states have to recognize it. You know that if you have a contract with somebody and it's authorized and whatever recorded in the state of Indiana, and you go to Wisconsin has to honor that contract. You can't flee to Wisconsin and Wisconsin say, "Oh, you're not in Indiana, so sure, you can violate that contract." That type of thing. Public acts, records, judicial proceedings. If Shem is found guilty of, what did he do this time? Theft? Grand Theft Auto. We're not talking about the video game. All right. He's found guilty in Indiana for something. Other states have to recognize the fact that he's been found guilty even after he's released from jail and has served his time. That record still follows him. So that type of thing is the surface is very basic. It does get a little bit complicated or a little more significant because it also would include things like marriage. All right? And if California lets 2 guys get married, do other states then have to recognize that? Okay, and the second part gives us a little bit of answer to that. And the Congress may by general laws prescribe the manner in which such acts, records, and proceedings shall be approved and the effect thereof. So it is within Congress's authority to regulate this somewhat. They could, if they wanted, say states do not have to recognize same-sex marriage. No, it's not. I don't know what I don't know what we need to come up with a better name. Abomination? Yeah, whatever. If some state allows that, Congress could pass a law saying other states do not have to recognize that marriage. Okay, so that does give Congress here some leeway to regulate this thing. But the surface level is very simple. States have to recognize them. So Congress actually did do that back in '96, the marriage thing. Anybody heard of the Defense of Marriage Act? DOMA, sometimes referred to. It's the law that Congress passed that one of the laws that Congress passed that the president said he was not going to enforce. And again, the president doesn't have that authority to pick and choose the laws he's going to enforce. But they did pass a law in '96 saying that if some state allowed it, other states are not forced to recognize that. So, all right, let's see here. Oh, I might be thinking incorrectly. I thought it was the Defense of Marriage Act he said he wasn't going to enforce.
Well, yeah, but then later...
Oh, that could be. It wouldn't, I mean, we were talking about a court system that literally said Devante is a piece of furniture. So there's no end to what they might declare. It very well might be, and I've forgotten. So I have one other note here, just to kind of give a little background. One of the original reasons behind this was for people in debt. They couldn't flee to other states and say, oh, I'm out of that state. You can't collect my debt. Someone like Tamar incurs thousands of dollars of debt in Indiana and just moves across the state line to Illinois and, makes faces at the college. I'm not paying you back, and the state of it, and you can't make me. Hopefully I have not incurred a lot of debt. But it was that was one of the initial issues they were very concerned about, people in debt just moving to another state, and then that state saying, we're not going to allow them to enforce that debt, to collect it here or support them or anything. So it was preventing that. So, all right, so the basic idea is very straightforward. States have to recognize marriages, birth certificates, death certificates, titles to property and things of that nature as you go from state to state. Good? All right, you must be excited about Article 5. There's no questions. All right, Section 2, Paragraph 1. The citizens of each state shall be entitled to all privileges and immunities of citizens in the several states. What in the world? Any ideas? Jacob?
I'm in another state and they have a specific way of prosecuting or something, and since I'm from another state, they're like, oh, you don't have that right to a defense or something like that.
Yes.
So,
yeah, the state can have these legal proceedings for residents of the state and this separate set of legal proceedings for non-residents. Right, you can't have two separate sets of rules. Or they can't say, oh, you're from Maryland. If you're going to own a business in Indiana, you pay this bigger tax or change the rules on you because you're from out of state. So basically the state of Indiana has to recognize, it's talking about people from other states. This is not talking about foreigners, people from other states. If they come into the state, then the rules apply the same to them as it does to everybody else. So the citizens of each state shall be entitled to the privileges and immunities of the citizens in the several states. Okay, so the state can't have a two-tiered legal system or two-tiered economic system or two-tiered tax system. Everybody's got to be the same. All right, the next one, next paragraph. A big fancy term here for this one. A person charged in any state with treason, felony, or other crime. Okay, so Megan now. What did you do? She really did commit a crime. Everyone in prison says that. So, Sarah, what did she do? I feel like grand fashion. I'm trying to think of a better word than faux pas.
Grand larceny.
Grand fashion larceny or something. All right, you commit this crime. That's a very egregious crime too.
Oh, wow.
Well, hers matches. Hers matches. It's okay. Sarah, that's not a compliment. If I say it matches, don't get excited. All right, she commits a crime here. All right, that's what we have. A person charged in any state with treason, felony, or other crime. She commits this crime. The police come drag her off. She faces the grand jury. Is officially indicted for this fashion crime. Okay, who shall flee from justice and be found in another state shall, on demand of the executive authority of the state from which he fled, be delivered up to be removed to the state having jurisdiction of the crime. So she commits this here, flees to California where there's a whole different set of fashion standards and she fits in. Sorry about that insult. The state of California, if Indiana asks for her back, which we might just... if Indiana asks for her back, California has to send her back. California cannot not keep her. All right. Anybody know the word for this? There's a term for this. It's very good. And she's also cheating. Extradition is what this is called. Extradition. We talked about this briefly with other countries. I forget the situation we're talking about. Yeah. All right, so that's the basic thought. You flee to another state, then the state you came from can request that you be sent back, and they don't have a choice to keep you. California can't say, well, it's not a crime here, we're not sending you back. They have to send you back. So there is one other detail here to mention at least. Which part of the state has to make this request? Can just our class get together and write a letter to California, please send her back so we can execute vigilante justice? Right. Who has to make, that isn't the right answer if you're wondering. Who has to make this request?
The executive branch.
Okay, the governor, the executive branch of the state, basically the governor and that side of the government has to do it. The legislature can't do it, the court system can't do it. It's got to come from that executive department, executive authority. So. Okay, straightforward? All right, next paragraph. This one's been amended by the 13th Amendment, but let's look at what it says. No person held to service or labor in one state under the laws thereof, escaping into another, shall in consequence of any law or regulation therein be discharged from such service or labor, but shall be delivered up on claim of the party to whom such service or labor may be due. So this is talking about slaves, and it's saying if a slave flees from a state where slavery is legal to a state where it isn't legal, they're still not freed, right? They can be returned back to the slave owner. But there's a very significant difference between this one and the extradition paragraph. Who's got to make the request in this case?
The slave owner?
The slave owner, right? It's not the governor of the state. The slave owner has to go through the hassle, the headache, and it usually, in many cases, the expense of locating the slave and then contacting the state government and requesting that he be sent back.
Is that where the whole Dred Scott case came in? Because he flew.
Well, he didn't flee. He was taken there by his owner.
And then,
He did claim that he was free then because his owner had taken him into a state where it wasn't legal. He didn't actually escape.
so does that apply to this though? Is that what this is pertaining to?
No, this would be for somebody that's escaped
Oh,
and fled into a free state.
oh.
So this is, well, the Dred Scott case is the one that said he's just a piece of property. That's how they dealt with it. They just said they threw the case out and said you have no standing. You're just property.
Oh.
So, where are we at here? Okay, so it's talking about slavery. That's the issue. And it is not the executive authority that is going to make this request. The governor, wow, the owner has to make the request. There was one of the compromises building up to the Civil War. One of them talked about, there was a law that passed through Congress saying that the governments would get involved in helping get this back, which was kind of bumping up this thing a little bit. So the original Constitution just said the owner has to find them and request that they be sent back. So. Okay, let's very, very quickly look at Amendment 13. It just completely bans slavery. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for crime, shall exist. Right, so at that point, there's no need for any laws considering what happens when they flee. Okay, so both paragraphs here kind of deal with extradition, but the one is just slaves, and it throws the responsibility on the owner of the slave. Think of the, I don't know, I mean, it really does throw it much more back on the owner. If Shem stole my car and drives it to Minnesota or something, I don't have to really do anything. The Indiana government, the state police, and the whole executive branch, they're going to figure out where he is, and they're going to contact that state and get him sent back, and they'll bring my car back to me, unless he's already cut all the pieces off of it and sold them on the black market. They're going to bring it back to me, all right? As opposed to me figuring out which state he fled to and going through that whole hassle. All right? So it's a significant difference here who the responsibility is thrown to. Okay, questions about that? Isn't this exciting? We're almost halfway through. I can feel Article 5 calling us. All right. New states, Section 3, Paragraph 1. New states may be... Wow. New states may be admitted by the Congress into this union. Okay, so right off the top we have who controls new states coming in. And who controls that?
Congress.
Congress. All right, the president can't arbitrarily make states. Right? The judges can't do that. It's got to go through Congress. Even Indiana, if we said we want to maximize the electoral votes of Indiana, so we're going to split the state into two pieces. That way we get two senators for each piece. You know, it increases the. Indiana doesn't even have that authority. It's got to go through Congress. Okay. All right, goes on. But no new state shall be formed or erected within the jurisdiction of any other state, nor any state be formed by the junction of two or more states or parts of states without the consent of the legislatures of the states concerned, as well as of the Congress. So if Indiana and Illinois got together and said we want to make Chicago Opera, Lakeland, or chop off Lake County, Indiana, and the whole Chicago area and make it its own state. Maybe we should go out to Rockford too. We want to make that its own state. Right. Would you fall in that territory outside of there?
I don't think so. We're about 45 minutes.
Well, we can swing that boundary down. get you in there. So, if Indiana and Illinois got together and wanted to do that, both of those states' legislatures would have to agree to that, and Congress would have to agree to it. So, if there's any state, any property that's already in a state is involved, the state legislature has to agree, as well as Congress. So, which I think is just a common sense requirement. So.
There's a movement in Maryland for pretty much to make Baltimore City and County kind of like its own little thing, because I even showed you that local map. Just the entire rest of the state just is outweighed by that city.
Yeah.
So they really want it gone.
I wonder if we could have a disjointed state. And take Detroit, take Chicago, and make them all one state.
Yeah.
Like Megapolis or something.
They would have a lot of seats in the House, though.
Yeah, they would. So it would be a two-edged sword.
Oh, wow, they would.
But at the same time, the other areas in those states would finally be able to run things how they want to run things. So.
It'd be interesting. I like the idea better of carving off a part of the country and letting all the liberals move there and just separating completely.
Don't you feel, though, that logistically, if you had to do that, that New York would be the best option? I mean, if you take the whole island in New York City, I mean, I think that's the size of Rhode Island.
Oh, you're saying that'd be its own state?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, it'd be enough people there to...
Easily.
Yeah. I don't think it'll ever happen, but it will be interesting. So, all right, I think you get the point there. New states, Congress does it, and they cannot just go into Texas and say, oh, you're way too big. And Texas would have to agree to that. So, all right, Section 3, Paragraph 2 now. The Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property belonging to the United States. And I had just realized we forgot to do something. Article 5 is not calling us. We still have a few little things to tie up in the judicial branch. Yeah. How many were thinking, he cheated us. He promised to finish up some things. Or how many were like me, you didn't even remember.
I just saw like a random asterisk that didn't have stuff next to it.
Okay, so we'll finish up Article 4 and go back and tie that stuff up. We've got time. And then, Sarah, if we get done early, we'll probably just celebrate. Maybe we'll start reading stories next chapter together in class to celebrate. All right, Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property belonging to the United States. All right, so the U.S. government owns a military base just south of D.C., where the Marine Corps base, Quantico, who makes the rules, regulations, and has the power to dispose of that thing. It's the second word. Congress does. Okay, so it falls within the jurisdiction of Congress to do this thing. The president can't arbitrarily sell the property off or things like that, or arbitrarily make rules or regulations. So anything any territory or other property belonging to the United States. So, and then the last part, and nothing, let me just back up. That is, what I said applies, but there's more here talking about the vast stretches of land where we live today that were not really part of any state. Right? That's more what it's talking about directly. So it goes on, and nothing in this Constitution shall be so construed as to prejudice any claims of the United States or of any particular state. So Virginia claimed everything. If you take the northern part, the northern tip of Virginia down to the southern tip and run it as a straight line all the way to the Mississippi, that's what they claimed. Right? So they were saying here, this does not throw that claim out. Right? That still has to, that can go through the courts and be argued and settled someplace else here. So, but once it's decided that it belongs to the national government, then Congress makes the rules and regulations, decides how it's sold, et cetera, et cetera. So, okay, section 3. Should I consult my notes? I have nothing written down there. So, all right, section 4. This made it into a reading. It was a question. The United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government. Did Story fear this? Apparently not. Josh doesn't feel like that, but Story did not fear this. But the basic thought is pretty simple. The United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government. And if we're picky with wording, which we probably should since this is a legal document, who is given the responsibility to guarantee this? Sarah's staring at me like, you've got to be kidding. We've seen the paragraph before, the Congress shall, before that, shall be amended by the Congress. Here we have the United States. So it's not specifically picking Congress or the executive branch. It's just saying that whole national level has the authority and responsibility to make sure that the states maintain a republican form of government. Okay? Now I know that brings up a question. What's the obvious question screaming at us? What happened? That's a good... What is a republican form of government? What does that actually mean, republican form of government? So historically, there are 3 things that was included in this idea of a republican form of government. Let me give you the 3 things. The first one is popular rule. The people participating in the government, choosing electors, or members of Congress, choosing members of the state legislature, choosing their governor, etc. Popular rule, somehow the people being involved. And then the second thing is no monarchy. You might think the one precludes the other, but it couldn't be that the state of Indiana votes to choose a monarchy. You can say, well, that's popular rule. And there's explicit saying you can't, monarchy is out, no matter what the people want, no monarchy. And then the third piece of this is the rule of law. The rule of law. Does anybody know what that means? It is not what we have right now, unfortunately.
The government subject to the same restrictions?
Sort of. The other option is the rule of man, if that helps any. Dustin's all over this one. I can't tell if you're thinking or daydreaming. I was going to assume daydreaming just to... Mary?
Is it some kind of executive branch that they need?
No, it's not that, no. Josh?
That versus the law of man. Okay, that law comes from God, and that inside of us is the law already.
God, Jesus, the Bible.
You know, in government class.
Sex and special government, yeah.
Yeah,
So.
that we have law in our hearts. And
You're correct. You're going faster downhill. Oh, Serenity.
Okay.
And then Sarah.
The rule of man is that man makes all the laws, and the rule of law is everyone is under the law.
Okay, cool. Yes.
I was yeah, basically that. Just people are under the law or they're under a man making his own law.
Okay, you're heading in the right direction. Rule of law means that whatever the established law is, that decides what happens. As opposed to whoever the leader is deciding what's going to happen. Like if well, let's go back to Shem, since it's actually a real crime. He steals a car. He goes to the courts, gets prosecuted. The law, whatever the law says, is going to decide what happens to him. The governor of Indiana doesn't have the authority, or shouldn't have the authority, to say, we really don't like Shem, and let's throw him in jail for life. Whatever the law says would dictate what happens. Okay? We are throwing this out the window as a nation, this idea of rule of law. Think of how many times, maybe you don't know, but think of multiple times the Affordable Health Care Act, Obamacare, was changed just upon the whim of the president. All right? Just, that part. Usually it's before an election, and that part is going to really look ugly and nasty, like fining people for not having health insurance or requiring businesses that have more than 50 people to provide health insurance to all of their employees that are full-time, that is approved under Obamacare. So waiving that for the year before the election so it didn't kick in until after the election. But things like that where he just is willy-nilly changing the law. That's the rule of man, okay, as opposed to the rule of law. So anyway, that is the third piece of this thing, the rule of law, where there's laws that are passed and the laws dictate what happens. Does that make sense? Okay, come next semester and we will talk about that more. I wasn't trying to scare you away, Megan. All right, so we have the United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government, okay, and shall protect each of them against invasion. Okay, I think that's straightforward. If the nasty Canadians invade and they start off with taking Detroit, the U.S. government has to still come and defend them. Just nuke it. It would increase the property value. I would take care of all the demolition. That would be anyway, the national government is required to protect against invasion. Obama, if Mexico invades Texas, Obama can't say those dirty Republicans had it coming to them and let it happen. He's required by the Constitution. Now, that only matters if we have the rule of law, which we're throwing out the window, so who knows. Okay, so protect against invasion. The national level is required to do that. And the last part, it's to stop husbands from beating their wives, I think. And an application of the legislature or the executive, when the legislature cannot be convened, against domestic violence. Or is that wives beating their husbands? Which way does that go? So, what is this talking about?
States fighting other states?
I'm sorry?
States fighting other states?
Not so much that. It's talking about some sort of violent protest or uprising within a state. If Indianapolis or Chicago, they're supposed to release that video today of it really does sound bad, the white cop that shot the black 16-year-old kid 17 times or something like that. My first thought was, wow, that's a pretty big clip. It's good. So, it sounds like they're going to indict the guy and charge him with murder. But anyway, they're supposed to release that video today. The race hustlers have been demanding this thing be released. And then those same race hustlers said, now if this gets violent and people get hurt, it's not our fault. But anyway, if it just erupts into violent chaos in Chicago, we may not notice a difference. If it does erupt into violence and chaos, the national government is required to come and help calm it down if the legislature asks for it or the governor. If the legislature is not actually meeting, the governor can ask for this kind of help. Okay, so that's what it's getting at. So, anybody remember Katrina? And Bush, this nasty, dirty dog who didn't help New Orleans? Part of it was that he couldn't. It was a state. He had to wait for the state to ask for the help. He could not just charge in and invade the state and take over. But anyway, that's never brought up.
That's just the funny thing is, as much as the Constitution binds the separation between authorities, it seems like people expect the government to operate like a monarchy. Like, why don't you just come in and do this, and why don't you just do this,
Yeah.
and why can't you?
Well, in that case, yes. If he had actually just come in and charged over the state governments, they would bash him for that. Really, at the heart of it is
Exactly.
it's a liberal press and a conservative president, so he's always bad.
Yeah.
But you're right. Too many people, and those people there are still people in these housing projects that were put up from Katrina. They're still sitting there, and they're still complaining about the government hasn't taken care of us. We got free housing for the last, it's been 12 years or something.
And they say that George Bush put the levees on purpose, so it would
Yeah. It was really fun to watch the people wading through the water, carrying the big TVs out of the electronic stores. Anyway. But anyway, the point was the national government could not go there and do anything until the state requested, either the legislature or the governor, depending on the situation. Okay, so it's to deal with domestic problems within the state. If there's a riot or some sort of rebellion and it gets out of control more than the state can handle, they can request help. So, okay, questions there? I told you it'd be pretty quick. Back to the court system. We've gone from dull and boring to abysmal. And what's one step down from boring? All right, I'm sorry, judicial branch. We are going out of order here. Last time we finished reading the the Article 3, talked about judicial review. What is that? That's what we do before the final. We review the judicial branch. Is that You're saying no? Or you're saying, I don't know. Please don't make me actually speak. Do you know? Oh. You spoke. That's an improvement. Mary.
The court declare something unconstitutional?
Yes, the courts have the authority to declare something unconstitutional, which should have happened with Obamacare. All right, anyway, should have been lots of things. And then we talked about judicial activism, which is an abuse of that legitimate power. And there's one of two things happening, or sometimes both. The court's going beyond the clear meaning of the Constitution, going more with what they think should happen than what the law actually says, the Constitution says. And then the other facet is declaring what the law should be. What you did was unconstitutional, now you have to do this. Okay, and they don't have that authority. We have even been ingrained with even the phraseology, when the court rules, it becomes the law of the land. Roe v. Wade is the law of the land. It's not. I mean, it's the opinion of the courts. That's it. So, okay, so that's judicial activism. All right, beyond that, I wanted to look at some other facets here of the court system. The first two things to look at are kind of some theoretical things, and then we'll get down to the actual breakdown of how the courts are organized. So the first thing is, why does the judiciary need to be independent? Why do we need a separate and distinct judicial branch? And you read the Federalist Papers, so you should have this right there. Oh, I know that one. That's an easy one. Give me some reasons. I have two main ones here.
Like in times past, let's say like the king, whatever, he would convict, he would charge him with whatever, and then you're dead, basically.
Okay, this one it's needed to point out where the limits of the government authority is. I mean, we need a court system that's outside the operations of the government to say, hey, you went too far. Okay, so that's one reason. I have a word this way: an independent court is very important in a country where there are limits to what the government can do. And we want that court system to be independent to point that out. Josh?
I think in the Federalist Papers, they said that not one of the two branches were more powerful than the other, as far as they had another balance on both of them. Right?
That's true, yes. Okay, I think you're heading this way. The judicial branch may be this way, just pretend like it.
Yeah.
The judicial branch is the weakest of the three.
Yes.
And it needs to be very independent so it is not influenced by the others. Okay, so theoretically, there's a very important reason for this branch to be very independent. We could argue that it's gotten too independent, and there's some truth to that, but really we've let it become too independent. We pointed out how Congress does have the authority to regulate even what rules or what laws they can take up and control. So anyway, the Congress has allowed it to become too independent. But anyway, independent, very, very important, even though it has led to some problems, very important. All right, the second kind of theoretical thing, is some things that cause it to be independent. What in our Constitution creates this independent court system? We've looked at least two of them in class, and then one of them was in the Fellows Papers, and I think we talked about it in class too. And the idea is, what causes it to be independent? They just sing Phil Schuyler's song and that takes care of it? I like to sing Sonia Sotomayor singing.
She drives a big car and smokes a cigar.
I don't know about that song. All right, let me give them to you. All right, the three things. One, they hold their positions for life, essentially for life. The Constitution says during good behavior, as long as they're good boys and girls, they hold their position. As presidents come and go, they don't get to be replaced, etc. They make a stupid ruling. They don't all get fired because of the stupid ruling. They're there for life. Okay. The second thing is their pay can't be lowered while they're in office. It does open up intentionally here that their pay can be raised to deal with inflation and things of that nature, but their pay cannot be lowered. And then the last one is something that's not in the Constitution, is there's no ability test whatsoever. There's nothing there. They don't have to. Think about a driver's license. Every 4 years or whatever it is, you got to go in and renew your driver's license and make sure that you can see. Is that about all they check? If you get a CDL, you got to go to physical and make sure you have four arms. You have 4 limbs, 2 arms, and 2 legs, and blood pressure's okay. There's some ability tests there, and if you don't meet that, then you can no longer drive. There's nothing like that. Okay? There's not even any ability test to become a judge. You guys are all qualified. We talked about, you're not old enough to be in Congress or old enough to be the president, but you could be a Supreme Court justice. And you would not do a worse job, I guarantee it. You would actually, I think, read the Constitution, and someone comes and says, this is a violation of my constitutional rights. You might be so stupid as to say, just exactly where is that right listed? Please show me. Where's the gay marriage thing there? Come on and see it. You might be that crazy. But anyway, the point is there's no test whatsoever. Does anybody remember the reason given for that in the Federalist Papers? Why they mention it's important there's not some test? Wait, somebody else. Are you going to cheat again? At least cheat on something where you get a grade. I'm kidding. Were you saying I do? Anybody remember?
There's no age discrimination?
There's no age discrimination. You're right. Serenity?
He's talking about after they are in office.
The ability test at any point.
So afterwards it'd be like, that way you can't pick them out and say, oh, they're unable to do their job.
Yeah. No matter what the test is, it's going to be used for political games. Oh, you're not qualified. It'll be used for political purposes, not to maintain ability. So very independent and very intentionally so. And those are the 3 main pieces that give us that independence. So, all right. Now let's look briefly at how they've organized this thing. Who is the they that gets to organize this thing? Josh is saying Congress with a question in his face. Senators? Legislatures? He's going to go back and just say they. The Bible. All right, it's Congress. Congress gets to regulate this thing. The Constitution mandates the Supreme Court. And then it says the other courts as Congress wants. So this is looking at how Congress has organized this thing. All right, the first set of courts, let me give you a name, and then when we get to the second type of courts, this will make more sense. The first set of courts are called constitutional courts. These are the courts that we're talking about here directly in Article 3. The court system coming directly out of Article 3. And you might be thinking, well, what other court system is Congress creating? And that maybe is a good question. We'll look at that for that second set. So these are constitutional courts. These are the ones directly out of Article 3. And I just wanted to look at the three main ones and then some others. So, all right, the first is district courts. These would be federal district courts. Federal district courts. The country split up, at least at the point I put this together a couple of years ago, 94 different districts. Each one of those districts has a court system, a federal district court with judges in those. Over 500 judges in this federal district court level. All of these picked by the president, approved by the Senate. I heard someone say that if a liberal gets in again, it'll be 2/3 of all of these judges that will have been picked by Obama or Hillary if she gets in, which is a really scary number. But anyway, yes. Oh, well, you were raising your hand, but you didn't have a question. All right, district courts. Yeah.
So Supreme Court, then district courts, or what's the
Appellate courts. We're kind of going the other direction. We're starting at the bottom, and we'll work our way to the Supreme Court. So we'll get there. District courts. This level of courts is the one that hears most of the cases. If you remember when we read the Article 3, it talked about some things having original jurisdiction, others appellate jurisdiction. There's a whole list of things that were just all others. This handles all those others. All right. Let me see here. About 90% of all of the federal cases take place in these district courts. All right, so this is the vast majority of them take place here. So district courts. I should give you this too here. These courts use a jury, which is mandated by the Constitution. All these trials have a jury. And there are two different types of juries. There's a grand jury. You even know what the grand jury does? They're about to do that today with the guy that shot the black kid 17 times. I want to wait and hear the whole story. I mean, the black kid had a knife and refused to give it up. 17 still seems like a lot.
He wouldn't finish the job.
Yeah, or maybe he had some, Obamacare approved firearm. It was one of those pump BB guns or something. All right, what's my question? Grand jury. A grand jury. It's called grand jury because there's a bigger group of people on it, larger in number. This is the one that handles indictments. The way to think of that is they're the ones that decide if there's going to be a trial. The police haul Shem off to jail. One of the first things that's going to happen is a grand jury hearing where the police will present evidence saying, here's some videotape, here's eyewitnesses, here's his fingerprints, we need to try this guy for grand theft auto. And that grand jury will say, yes, we need to have a trial. That is referred to as an indictment. Okay, so that's the grand jury. The other is called a petit jury, P-E-T-I-T. That's the jury that we think of. That's the jury in the actual trial. 12 people who decide if Shem is guilty or innocent. Okay, so all of these district courts, all of their trials involve these juries, which is mandated in the Constitution. Okay, the second type of constitutional court is courts of appeals. Shem's found guilty. I suppose if he's found innocent, he could appeal it too and say, no, I really did steal the car. They got it wrong. He's found he's found guilty. He appeals. It would go here. Actually, if you stole a car, it would be in the state court system, but that's okay. It would go to this place, and it's an appeal. It's the second layer Court of Appeals. There's 13 of these across the country. Excuse me. These courts have no original jurisdiction. All they do is hear appeals. Okay. And there's not a jury involved in these. It's a judge or a panel of judges, and it would be Shem or his lawyers saying, they said I committed grand theft auto, but if you look at the evidence, I only committed grand theft. I stole a bicycle. It wasn't a car, so they misapplied the law. They'll just be arguing things like that. Or Shem could say, these witnesses lied and they believe them and they should be overturned. It's not a jury looking at this thing anymore. It's some judges looking at it to decide if the thing should be thrown out.
Is that where some people say that some people get released, whatever, because they don't have enough evidence, or is that the same thing?
There are times where these appeals courts will release people that have been found guilty prior. So maybe. Other times they're found innocent in the district court. Okay, and then the last of these three main ones is the Supreme Court. If Shem is still found guilty in the appeals court, he could appeal it to the Supreme Court. Okay, and all these Supreme Court cases we've been hearing, the Obamacare rulings, the gay marriage rulings, all of those things have gone through this process through the appeals and made it to the Supreme Court. So, all right, the last thing here is the other constitutional courts. There's just a couple others I want to mention so you get an idea of what else is there. You think, well, isn't that enough? It probably is. What else is there? There's some things like this. A United States Claims Court. That's kind of... if you've ever watched Judge Susie or Judy or something like that, where,
That's a real court.
Well, I don't know if it's a real court, but they agree prior to it to agree to abide by the ruling, whatever it is. So, but anyway, this is kind of a small claims court. Davey has... The National Guard is practicing and they run over his car with their tank. Okay. He can go to the United States Claims Court and say, hey, wait a second, I want reimbursed for this. They probably would pay you back way before it got to here. But anyway, kind of that kind of claims. So, okay. One other one, United States Court of International Trade. There are others that fit in this category, but for time's sake, United States Court of International Trade. Can anybody guess what this deals with? Trade, international trade, very good. These courts don't typically have a jury trial, but if you don't like the ruling of the judge, you can always push it and it'll go to a district court. All right, but it's mostly minor things that can be handled much more in a procedural manner. So, okay, the other part of these courts to look at, we have constitutional courts. Those are the ones from Article 3. If you look real quick back to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. Oh. If you have yours handy, go ahead and look real quick. This has been frequently missed on something in the future that might be coming up. So I'm trying to emphasize where these courts come from. Question?
This is just for my slow brain at the moment. Supreme Court, Courts of
Appeals, District courts,
and then these other ones that
would be below that, yeah.
Okay, I have this. I just want to make sure. It was
Okay, yeah, I don't really have them in that order, but yeah, that's as far as order of power and significance, that would be right. So, this is the part that says to exercise all legislation in all cases whatsoever. Section 8, next to the last paragraph. So this is the powers of Congress, and it says they exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district, etc. This is talking about military bases, the District of Columbia, that type of thing. So in all cases whatsoever also includes organizing a court system. Okay, so this would be, the first one is territorial courts. The Virgin Islands and Guam and places like that. They have a court system organized by Congress. The authority comes from here, as opposed to from Article 3. So these are called legislative courts because they come out of the authority given to Congress through its legislative powers. Does everyone see the difference? Josh is really squinting. I'm not sure. Okay, it's possible. To exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever. That's the idea, over districts, territories, etc. So Congress has this exclusive control over these things, and that would include making a court system. The District of Columbia has a court system. It's not from Article 3, it's from here. Right? So, all right, let me just give you a couple of these. Territorial courts is one. I gave you that already. Another one is the courts of the District of Columbia. Talk about a dysfunctional place. Military courts. And then one last one here, there are others, but just to give you the idea, is the United States Tax Court. This only hears civil cases. All right? If the federal government says Megan owes $1,000 in taxes, and she says, no, I owe $10 in taxes, and they can't decide, they could go to this United States Tax Court, and that court would help decide. If she doesn't like the ruling, she can push it on and go on to a full jury trial. That would be interesting. All right, but it only handles civil cases. If Megan doesn't pay her taxes for 10 years, and the government comes after her for tax fraud, it's not going to go here. It's going to go to the district court as a crime. So, but anyway, so tax court. It's just for disputes, civil disputes over taxes. You say you've only been doing it for 2 years? Oh, so you're fine. You've got a couple years. A couple years to wait. Guys, if you're thinking about that, a couple years of marriage and then you're free. So, all right. Any questions? Yes, Megan, you can be dismissed.